Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am Kenneth Shark Kinney, your host and Chief Shark Officer. Let me tell you first about two amazing sponsors who make this show possible. Let's talk about Inbound. From marketing to sales and commerce to CX, Invoca's active conversation intelligence platform enables revenue teams to create better buying experiences, drive more leads, and increase revenue. Trusted by top brands like Dish Network, Mayo Clinic, Mutual of Omaha, and ADT, the Invoca team is doing some amazing work in turning conversational data into automated action to enhance digital touchpoints and human interaction. Now let's talk about Outbound. I hope that you'll take a look at Drips, the founders of conversational texting, where they use conversational AI to help you reach customers where they're most responsive, and that's on their phones. And working with major brands like 3 Day Blinds, Liberty Mutual, Credit Repair, and Gainsco, Drips is leading the way for some of the biggest brands in the world to improve engagement rates and outcomes for their prospects and customers. And now, back to the show. Are your social posts always about you, or are they for your audience? After all, how do you show up? Audacious and bold, or just braggadocious Bob, or in the gym Jim? It's not always easy for personal brands or corporate ones to power up potential and be one of the voices gaining traction by showing up and sharing what's helpful. When someone sees your post, can they actually say that they're better for having scrolled by that piece of content? Now's the time to unlock it all because, after all, you're kind of a big deal. Erin King is a 3-time entrepreneur, international keynote speaker, helping people communicate more compellingly in the digital age, and the author of both Digital Persuasion as well as her newest book, You're Kind of a Big Deal. And on this episode, we'll discuss living by the beach, becoming a keynote speaker by chance, Cavapoos and Betty White, shifting from social media to social selling to communication, having an audacious level of bravery and courage, better phrases for social posts to frame your story, how to show yourself visually but type them verbally, personal branding and content creation, digital high fives, landing the plane, the pub method, skinny and anorexic margaritas, Jesse Spano, and a lot more. So let's tune into a queen of a big deal with a king of a shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Erin, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. Would you please tell us a little bit about your background and your career to date?
Thanks for having me, Kenneth.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. I like that background. Beautiful beach environment. Very, very zen and very on brand.
Very on brand. I'm mentally here 99% of the day.
I love it. Well, we're here in Laguna Beach, California. My husband, my fur baby, Betty White, and we all live 1 block from the beach, which is the good part. The bad part is to be able to afford to live 1 block from the beach.
Yeah.
We live in a crappy place that has not been updated since the 1960s. We have no AC, no heat, no parking, no dishwasher, no microwave, but we can hear the waves at night and we can surf out front. And so that's where we live. So my career, I've been a serial entrepreneur since forever and ever. I've started 3 ventures. The first one was a train wreck. The second one broke even. And the third one was pretty successful.
That's
We
great.
ended up, working with some pretty big clients, everyone from the Oscars in Hollywood to the United States Navy, helping them with their social media presence for live events was our jam. And then one day I was doing a live event for I think it was the Auto Care Association. So it was 190,000 gearheads in Las Vegas. And there was a breakout room with 200 people in it. And the meeting planner came up to me and she is bawling, crying, hysterical, mascara down the face. And she's like, my social media breakout speaker is sick and just canceled. Can you go into this breakout room and just tell them what you and your team are doing for us here at the show, running social media for the event? And that was my first speaking engagement. It was terrifying. And afterward, a couple people said, hey, what's your fee? And I'm like, you can get paid to do this? Are you kidding me? Like, why am I running this agency and getting gray hair prematurely when I could be having fun on stage, teaching what I know and sharing my stories? So that launched my speaking career. And I've been writing books and full-time keynote speaking and online courses ever since, just sharing what I have learned in 15 years of up and down entrepreneurship, everything from being featured in Forbes to being so broke I couldn't pay a cell phone bill. So I've been up and down and all over, and I share those stories with my audiences.
So one point of clarification and then a follow-up question to that event. You said fur baby. I've seen your pictures on Instagram, but your
Yes.
fur baby is not your husband. It's your dog. What kind of
Yes.
dog is it?
She is a Cavapoo, a Cavalier and a Poodle mix.
Wow.
Yes. And she's 7 months old. She's a little sass pants, and I'm obsessed with her.
Second question is, did you get paid for that first speech?
No.
After they did it and they loved you, did they give you a check?
Well, I was on site running a team of social media journalists. So they paid us to be there. And I just swapped out an hour of live tweeting speakers, which is what I essentially did, for an hour of just talking about, hey, here's how we organize before, during, and after an event with our social media. So I kind of got paid. Um, but then, yeah,
It was a
I had
down
three
payment.
different, yeah, and I had three different clients or people in the audience that were like, hey, we want you to come speak at our brand or our sales meeting. What's your fee? And I'm like, I cannot believe you can get paid to share what you know. And all of a sudden it's funny because my speaking business is my fourth venture, and it's the one that I actually didn't set out to create. It's the one that's created itself. Now, obviously, I work on it really, I work very hard on it, but it's the first one that I wasn't like, okay, I want to go out and do this. Like, it just kind of found me, and it's been, I mean, it's the biggest honor. It's the most pinch yourself job on the planet, I believe.
Oh, it's a roller coaster. But whoever was the speaker that disappeared, you should anonymously send them a little Christmas gift every year and thank them for creating that
Yeah.
opening, because it's a fantastic story. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about why and how you transitioned from a social digital media company owner to being a speaker. What made you make that move?
Well, when I first started working in social media, it was 2004. So I've been in it since the very beginning. I mean, my very first time with it was a software company, and we were like a match.com for trade shows. So we would pair attendees with exhibitors. It was called Smart Booth. And this is obviously right when LinkedIn came out. It was essentially the same concept. LinkedIn is still here, Smart Booth is not. But I've been working in that space since the very beginning. And back when we were doing social media for live events, it was really, we had to convince big brands like Visa, Siemens, Hitachi. I can go on and on. You name a Fortune 100, we'd run social media for them. And back then, I was at conferences or at conference room tables trying to explain to CEOs why Twitter and Instagram were actually important. So I was just evangelizing it in the early days. Well, it was great for us because no one really had full-time social media people at these events. And so then they would then bring us in to train their sales teams and their marketing teams. So it was really great. But over the last 5, 6, 7 years, those huge brands, they get it now. They get social media. So now they have their own full-time people, full-time teams. And so I think the value we provided was to kind of get them initiated into it, get them off the ground. We'd help them launch a lot of pilot programs. But now in 2021, I mean, social media is a whole department of these companies. And so we found our demand for what we were doing was actually going down, but the demand for learning my strategies, but teaching it to their in-house people went up. So that's how my speaking career sort of transitioned from outsourcing it to teaching it.
Well, let's start off at least and talk about your newest book.
Yeah.
You're kind of a big deal. It's the true life story of getting to know Kenneth Kinney. No, just kidding. It's you're kind of a big deal. Level up by unlocking your audacity. So
Yeah.
who is the audience, and how are you going about trying to serve them?
Yeah, well, the audience is really anyone who has felt a little lost during this pandemic. I don't know about you, Kenneth, but I had a moment during the pandemic where someone was like, "So what do you do for work?" And I had been on Zoom calls,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I'm like, can you say you're a speaker if you're just on Zoom like everybody else?" Like, what do we do? What are we? And so I think a lot of us had a little bit of an identity crisis, whether you're an event planner or you're an athlete or a musician or an artist or anyone who made a living boots on stage. Now your stage became Zoom, which everyone else in the world was also on that stage. So it was just a really tricky 18, 20 months for a lot of us. And so the book was born out of reminding ourselves who the hell we are, what we know, and what we do have to bring the world. And it begins with believing we have a story to tell, we have something to say, and we have value to contribute. And so the book is all about reminding you how to unlock what I call your big deal energy.
With this book, how did you pivot from your first book, Digital Persuasion, Sell Smarter in the Modern Marketplace?
Well, it's a diversity play because I'm looking at diversifying my topics. Because when I saw The Social Network, have you seen that movie on?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I watched that after I avoided it intentionally for a long time because everyone was talking about it, and I was like, fingers in the ears. I'm like, I don't even want to know. I mean, I know, but I don't want to know. And when I watched that documentary, I just sat on the floor of my living room and I'm like, I have been a part of this problem since the beginning. I have been evangelizing this since the beginning. Now, just like anything else, I mean, there's good and bad. It's not inherently good or evil. It depends on how you use it, right? Um, but it just got me thinking, like, is this still what I am the most passionate about? And so that was what triggered for me a migration into talking more about mindset, entrepreneurship, confidence, audacity, sort of more in the, I hate the term self help, but I think it's more like personal development space, right? So I started transitioning into that. I still talk about digital persuasion because I believe that there's still a ton of value in, especially right now with the Delta variant and people still working flex and from home. There's still a lot we need to learn about how to show up powerfully from behind the screen so we don't bore people to tears and so we're powerful and persuasive. But I've shifted my conversation to be not as much social media heavy and more social selling. So how do we show up in our DMs and our emails and even conversations like this on Zoom? So it's sort of moved from social media to communication, which I'm always very passionate about. And then the new book is about audacity, which I think is something we really, really need now more than ever as we reinvent into new, scary, untested spaces. We have to have that audacious level of bravery and courage and test and learn at a level that we've never really had to before.
First time I got to see you speak was at Influence in person. The speech was fantastic. And I think what drew me to want to have this conversation with you is I was super intrigued by somebody who had worked with large brands like the ones you mentioned, Siemens, Old Navy, Fortune 100,
Yeah.
all these big
Yep.
companies.
Yeah.
And you transitioned into really in a business where you're promoting yourself and your own personal brand. I'm often fascinated, having worked with a lot of these large brands, similar brands like that myself, and having worked with them on social media. It's always now interesting for me to see people move from the role of influencer or just a person posting on social, moving and trying to take a lot of what they've learned as an individual and applying that to the brand level. And I'm curious where you see the parallels and where you see the complete screw ups, because there's a, with Instagram in particular, which you do extra well on, there's a big focus on you and your vacation spots, gym at the gym, all those funny taglines you've got about different people and profiles. When they go and try to apply that knowledge for a lot of large brands, it completely fails because it becomes a lot of that brand speak and all about brand and them.
Yes. It's definitely, in my opinion, easier to be a coach than a player sometimes.
Yeah, great.
And as thought leaders, as speakers, as authors, whatever we call ourselves, we often preach the lessons that we have to learn the most. And having led digital strategy for, I mean, I dialed into the Pentagon and I was talking to the United States Navy about the digital communication strategy. I've worked with the Oscars in Hollywood, at Fashion Week. Nelson Mandela's family was one of my clients. We worked on his 90th birthday celebration in New York for his Legacy of Hope Foundation. I've worked with really random, like the National Radiological Society of North America. So my span of brand experience is, you name it, I've worked with at least one brand in that space. And transitioning into taking my own medicine and applying it to my own brand has been humbling for sure. And it's so funny because I look at, when anyone comes to me and they're like, okay, I want to do a new brand positioning. I want to know who I stand for. And I can run anyone else through the exercises and it's so clear to me. But when it comes to ourselves, because we're so intimately tied to our work and we're so emotionally invested, it's impossible to have a third party objective lens on how we show up to the world when it comes to our own content. For example, you saw my talk at Influence. I'm a big fan of making sure you're flipping the focus of your content and asking yourself, is this serving me or is it serving my audience? And that's a very basic question, but oftentimes I'll find, even just now, we were on vacation for 3 weeks and I'm like, okay, I'm not just going to brag about my vacation and me, and look what I did, but instead I'm going to make it about my audience. Have you ever found yourself facing burnout? How did you deal with it? How do you recharge? And so it's more of a conversation around, here's what's worked for me. Maybe it might work for you, rather than just, hey, I went wine tasting and you didn't, brag, brag, brag. Right. So I'm always trying to walk my walk and walk my talk and take my own medicine. It is certainly not easy to do. And that's why I think the biggest way that if people listening to this are struggling with taking your own medicine when it comes to your marketing and sales and personal branding, making sure that you have a very carefully curated personal board of directors has been my secret to success. I have 5 people, actually all NSA people, but three of them are my she noters. So Neen James, Tamsin Webster, Tammy Evans, Mike Ganino, and Brian Fanzo. Those are my 5 truth tellers. And I will send them, I was just emailing Mike Ganino before we got on this podcast about my new keynote. I will send them content. I will send them videos. I will send them emails. And I'll be like, guys, on the douche meter, how are we ranking? Okay. Are we coming in? Are we being authentic or are we being another braggadocious, douchey speaker? Because it's so easy for us to fall into this narrative of, well, if we don't brag about ourselves, who will? And the reality is, that may have worked for a long time, but we are experiencing a lot of perfection fatigue right now. Everyone on the internet with a phone is now broadcasting every moment of their life. Everyone has a quote to share, a piece of advice to dispense. And this idea of I'm the best, I'm number one, I'm cutting edge, it's kind of 90s. It's kind of old school. It's not as powerful. And when you look at the voices right now that are gaining traction, that are attractive to us to follow. They're not the voices beating their chest and dropping all of their press hits and their number one this and their buzzword that. It's the people that are just showing up and they are sharing concrete, personally useful brief information that you are better for having scrolled by that piece of content. Those are the voices that are winning. And so we are constantly here. I have a small team. Everything we're doing, our videos, our emails, our content, we are constantly saying, is this serving us and making us look cool? Or so we think, which is actually the opposite. Or are we showing up with a heart of service? Are we really offering a piece of value that someone, when they scroll by, they'll walk away from that engagement having something that elevates them and doesn't deflate them, which is what so much of social content can ultimately really do.
So, what are some of the key phrases that we should use in our posts?
Oh, well, I mean, any phrase in the first sentence that doesn't have the word I is a good start. It's really hard to do. It's, we are behind screens and we can't see someone rolling their eyes or leaning back or skipping to the next video. And so we kind of throw up and show up when we're behind the screen. It's kind of like Dear Diary mode. We just talk about ourselves because we're literally talking to ourselves on these screens. So the most important thing that we do is we make sure that the very first sentence is always you based. It forces your brain to flip into a space of service and not braggadocious, being, douchey on the internet. So some of the phrases that we use to start, we'll start with, have you ever? Imagine that you, so there you are. Just anything that isn't saying I'm here and I'm amazing. And it helps you frame your story in a way that isn't all about you. So the phrase we use, with my team is that we show about us, but we type about them. We show us visually, but we type them verbally. And that's sort of the cornerstone of everything that we put out, from podcasts to all of our content. We put out a good amount of content, and it's always, yeah, okay, it's fine if it's us visually, but everything we're talking about is not Bragasaurus Bob or just went to the gym as much as possible. But it's easier said than done. I mean, dopamine's very real. And when it rains likes and it rains fire emojis and it rains fire and dancing red dress lady and everyone thinks you're the best, it does feel kind of good. And especially in pandemic times when we are still maybe a little isolated or maybe feeling lonely or lost, when the internet says bravo, it kind of makes you put back your shoulders and it makes you crave more of that digital approval. But the reality is that we can get that approval while also making sure that we're making the internet a better place and not feeding into the influencer negativity that can sprout from just always shouting about how great we are.
Yeah, and one of my favorite parts of your talk is talking about the digital high five discussions with those posts. The dopamine that creates for other people.
Yeah.
Just engaging on somebody else's social is still something that is completely amiss today on LinkedIn, but not nearly enough on all the channels as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. I actually have on my calendar this morning. It's my first day back from vacation, and I've been on vacation for 3 weeks, doing nothing but shutting down. I was off digital for 9 days, no
Good for you.
phone, no social. Anyway, but so I have this to do on my list today, which is digital high fives. And every day, just like going to the gym, I spend 30 minutes and I go through prospects, clients, friends, family. And you aren't just doing it, to be shallow and just, make everyone like you. You're literally going and looking at everyone's content, seeing what everyone's about. You're connecting, you're being thoughtful with your comments, you're offering genuine ideas, insights, questions, and hopefully some love, so that when you walk away from that time, it's time well spent, because not all time scrolling is equal. You can either be, consuming inputs that are not serving you, or you can be consuming inputs from people that can help further your business, and then putting out that positive output back to them to create an actually quality feedback loop for both of you. So all scrolls are not created equal, and being really intentional about how you spend that scroll time is a fight that I wage every day.
So, talk about the value of storytelling, especially with social, and how to land the plane successfully. Something that Southerners, as you've said, have a problem doing with our long, long stories.
Land the plane. Well, I have a problem doing it. I'm Irish Catholic from the East Coast, and we are epic storytellers, as in all the details, all the stuff. And my stories are way too long. My husband's always like, "You need to land the plane. Bring it home. You're losing them. They're glazing over. Let's drop the point and move on." So as far as landing the plane on digital and social, one of the biggest ways to land the plane actually isn't even at the end of your story. It's just don't dance around in the beginning. Just dive right in. Even this morning, I was on I'm a member of a community called Growth Day, and it's a bunch of these amazing thought leaders, Brendan Burchard and Mel Robbins and Dave Hollis and who else is on there? Like Dean Graziosi and Jenna Kutcher and all these incredible thought leaders in our space. And someone was on there today, and they're a great storyteller. But it was funny because they spent the first 15 minutes trying to get comfortable on the Zoom. So they're kind of like throat clearing, dancing around, and they finally got to the story. But I had to really hang in there to even get to the nugget. And I wish this person, who usually does a great job, who did a great job, but it just wasn't like their A game. We all have those off days. It was a good reminder for me that we don't have to dance around in the beginning and like prep and tease and remind and kick the can around. We can just open up and dive right into the story, right into the beginning, right into the goods. Our audience is ready and primed. And that's the difference between online and offline. When you're offline, that kind of approach of like jumping in right away with your story or diving in with the attention getter can be a little bit jarring or harsh offline. Like people like to have a little rapport, a little play with you, kind of come back and forth with the audience. That feels more comfortable offline. But online, because we have 17 other screens opened up while you're telling your story or while you're trying to make your point, diving right in is the best way you have to assure that you get their attention right from the beginning, and don't risk losing them. And you can always tell the biggest indicator to know if you are rocking something on virtual, for example, like this person this morning, is the speed of the chat. Like you could see when they first started off, the chat was blowing up and then it kind of slows down. That's always a metric for me that I know I need to land the plane, move on, tell a new story, get to the point, is when the chat slows. When the chat slows, it's because someone is going and doing something else, because we love to be a part of it. We're interactive. If you're into a speaker online, you are dropping comments, you are dropping questions, you're playing with them in the chat. And so it's a great indicator to know whether or not you're landing the plane with your stories. Is the chat still blowing up, or is it frozen? Because it's probably because they're glued to their screen and they just are so spellbound they can't move to type. I guarantee that's not what it is.
Do you think you have done as much with engagement on people's stories and their social posts as you've grown a bigger following as you did when you didn't have a big following?
100%. It's not as scalable. I can't. So for example, like in my DMs, I used to answer every single DM. Well, now we have an automated, like it gives them a bunch of links automatically, if they're not in my primary inbox, because it's just from a scale perspective, I can't respond to everything. But from an outreach standpoint, from a proactive standpoint, not just the reactive side, but proactively, I have my top 25 every month. And it's 25 individuals that are either someone that I want to get to know better, someone that I want to hire me, someone that knows the person I want to get to know, whoever they are. I have 25 people every month, and I touch them online intentionally and genuinely and authentically by following their content, engaging, sending articles, and ideally using that digital to ignite a real dialogue, because the goal is to get out from beyond the screen and have a dang conversation with someone like we are, or at least as best as we can on video, right? So the idea is to move out of DMs, and what I have leaned on heavily to move the conversation to a real connection and not just that surface level banter, which is better than nothing, but still not like ideal to build a great relationship. I lean super heavily on audio DMs. I love social audio. I feel like it's the fastest way to bring someone into your energy, make sure nothing's lost in translation, and sort of make it feel it took a little extra second to say, hey, I'm chatting with you, I'm talking to you, I really want to connect. I feel like those DMs are how I've connected with a lot of people who I feel are out of my league. So people that have 10 times the following I do, or the bigger footprint, we all have like the 15 or 20 people that we're like, gosh, we'd love to get 10 minutes with them. Those social audio DMs, personal useful brief, all about them in the beginning, something useful, and then the brief ask. Would love to connect with you for 10 minutes this day at 10 or 1, has helped me to get on podcasts that I probably shouldn't have gotten, conversations with people that probably wouldn't give me the time of day. So that's sort of been the really interesting, effective tactic that I've been leaning on pretty heavily.
So, what is the pub method?
The pub method, well, you learned about it at Influence, personally
I'm
useful
trying to act
brief.
surprised when you tell us that story
I
all over
love it.
again.
Yeah, it's putting the pub and publish. It's a method that my team and I developed a couple years ago. We had a couple clients that were on retainer, but then we also had a pay for play performance compensation model. So we wanted to get a kicker on our efforts, and so we said, hey, if we can generate X numbers of activities, of replies, of meetings, can you pay us a commission on top of our retainer? And so the pay per performance model is obviously great if you're performing well, or it's a huge waste of time if you're not. And so we started analyzing, we were really motivated to figure out what worked. So we analyzed thousands of sales conversations that we were working with all of our clients, and we found that there were three elements to the most highly performing messages across all platforms and all industries. And they were messages that open with something very personal, not hi, how are you, but it looks like you're called Shark because you're a diving and shark enthusiast. You'd be like, they Googled me. Okay, go on, right? So opening it personal, offering something useful. Do you know that StreamYard is an excellent platform for live podcasting because XYZ? I have a code if you're interested. I love it, whatever, offering something useful to them, keeping it brief, landing the plane and saying, love to talk more about all things scuba diving, StreamYard, social audio. Are you available Tuesday at 10? Let's jam. Making sure the message is personal, useful, and brief when you're trying to get the attention of someone that you don't really know. So this is getting out beyond your existing sphere of influence. And we found that this was the formula. This was the pattern for driving yeses, opens, replies, likes, comments, action from behind the screen. And so the pub method was born, and we began using it for everything: lives, DMs, emails, trainings. And we taught it to all these different sales teams, Fortune 100s across the world. What they found was they were spending half the time, they were spending twice the time reaching out, but they were also getting 5 to 7 times the response rates from new prospects and people that didn't know them. So it took longer, but it was a quality over quantity approach. And this is kind of revolutionary because, it's the spray and pray, it's a numbers game. We were kind of teaching, like, if you're still playing the numbers game, your days are numbered, is what we said. So that was really helpful for a lot of our clients. I began teaching it on stage to a lot of network marketing companies and other brands, and that formed the pub method in my book, Digital Persuasion, which I teach multiple times a week to pretty much anyone that's in sales marketing or just want to be a better communicator and influence the way people respond to you to be a more positive response and not just ignoring you, rolling your eyes, or not being impressed.
So, you as a speaker, what do you think people get out of learning from you and your value as a speaker? I've seen you speak, thought you were fantastic. So what's the general message that you think you're going to be talking about today or a year or two from now? Is it going to be more still heavy in the social and digital markets?
Yeah, well, the big problem that I solve is I help people to stop saying to themselves, I just don't know what to write. I don't know what to post. I don't know what to say. I help solve that problem for everyone that I work with. And when they know they have a formula, a prompt they can use, all of a sudden they do know what to say. They do know what to share. And most importantly, they can feel more confident in how they're showing up. They can feel confident knowing this is a tried, proven, tested method that will dramatically increase how they're showing up on screen so that it's closer to who they are in the real world, offline, which is a persuasive, powerful, influential person. So that's what I love the most. It's like, oh my gosh, it seems so simple, but people say it's like a Dale Carnegie for digital. It's like how to win friends and influence people. It's not, this is not new content. It's just a little easy way to kind of run your content through to ensure that you're closing the gap between online you and offline you and elevating your persuasion power. So I talk a lot about that. I also talk about my new book, which is, like I said earlier, about unlocking your audacity, which is, I'll be honest, I mean, it's a pink cover. The second word in the book is tampon. My target audience is definitely a lot of women and a few good men. So depending on where you fall in that range, if you're just feeling like you need a good pump up book to feel like remembering who the hell you are and that you do have this and you can do this, that's the book. It's like a big old fist bump to the heart and mind and soul. And that's my goal with that book. So I had my keynote for that, which is going to be actually debuted for the second time only next week in Texas. So I'm really
Fantastic.
excited to do that.
So, Erin, I ask this of everyone who's been on the show, but you're actually lucky enough to be in Laguna Beach at the beach and near all my friendly sharks. What is your favorite kind of shark and why? Surely you surely have a shark story being a surfer.
Well, my favorite kind of shark is Mark Cuban because I love Shark Tank.
Good answer.
But I will say I have seen a shark once in the water when I was surfing in Mexico. And when they say your blood runs cold, I saw a chunk out of a fin and I said, that is not a dolphin. And let me just say, I did not stick around to find out what kind of shark it was. I paddled in as fast as I could and took a few waves on the head, and my heart was racing. And it took me a couple weeks to get back in the water because it was terrifying. The stealthiness of the fin just cruising by. It was definitely mind-numbingly terrifying. So as a surfer, I do not have a favorite shark. But I know that they that the chance of being eaten by a shark are like 1 in a gajillion.
Gazillion, yeah.
I still don't want to test my odds.
Erin, it's that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Number 1, you wear sneakers on stage. So which is it, Nike or Adidas? Which is your favorite?
Adidas.
Okay. Number 2, you're a skinny margarita kind of gal that I've read. So this is a 2-parter. Frozen or on the rocks, and salt on the rim or sugar?
Rocks, no salt. And I also have a recipe for what I call an anorexic margarita, which is skinnier than skinny. It's
Okay.
just Casamigos, soda, fresh lime juice, and the saddest little boop of agave, just to be polite.
Nice. All right. Number 3, I know that you're a Saved by the Bell fan, including Miss Jessie Spano, who was brilliantly portrayed by Elizabeth Berkley, who later went on to one of my favorite bad movies of all time, Showgirls, for different reasons. But I will flip the script and ask you this: Zach Morris or AC Slater?
AC Slater all day. Come on, Mario Lopez.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. So number 4, because you talk about this all the time, and we're going to see where your loyalties lie: Notre Dame or Alabama? If they were playing in a football game.
Alabama.
Yeah, it's
Roll Tide.
kind of unfair. I know you like the South anyway, but
I married
Alabama's going to destroy them whether God helps Notre Dame or not, I'm afraid. So, all right, number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Cornbread.
All right, fair enough. Erin, where can people find out more about you, keep up with you, what you're doing, get a copy of the book and more?
Well, now I'm hungry for cornbread. ErinKing.com. Everything's right there. I'm also, I spend time on Instagram. That's my social media place of choice. It's a love-hate relationship, but I'm there most days. So just send me a DM. I'll do my best to connect with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin, so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thanks, Kenneth.
So there was my conversation with Erin King, a 3-time entrepreneur, international keynote speaker, helping people communicate more compellingly in the digital age, and the author of both Digital Persuasion as well as her newest book, You're Kind of a Big Deal. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, Erin starts us off with a great point, and I'll paraphrase it a bit. We need an audacious level of bravery and courage and be able to test and learn like never before as we reinvent everything. Love that. Second, as Erin said, it's easier to be a coach than a player sometimes, and we often have to preach the lessons we need to learn the most. Great point about how we create content. Is what you're posting serving just you, or is it serving your audience? Is it me, or for them? I love that she has a curated board of directors, as she calls it, to keep her humble. So who keeps you grounded? Who truly looks at what you post and really tells you the truth? Third, with social posts, any phrase that doesn't have the word I in the first sentence is helpful and doesn't make it just you based, you the one that posted it. As she said, it will help flip your brain into a space of service and not just being braggadocious. Use phrases like, have you ever, and imagine that you. It will help you frame your story so that it isn't all about you. She teaches to show about us, but type about them. And I love the question she poses about content creation. Are you better for having scrolled by a piece of content? Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time, and I'm so thankful to everyone who listens. Thank you to the amazing sponsors Invoke and Drips, and would you please consider writing a review and letting me know your thoughts? I read them all. It helps me create better content for the both of us. Yes, indeed, you are kind of a big deal, and I'm honored that you joined us today. Keep swimming, and please join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.